Russia is increasingly attacking the United States over the war around Iran, and analysts say this could be a sign that relations between Moscow and Washington are getting worse. That is according to a new analysis by the Institute for the Study of War. The report says the Kremlin is using the escalation in the Middle East not only to criticize the United States, but also to prepare the ground in case future negotiations over the war in Ukraine collapse. Institute for the Study of War notes that Russian officials are increasingly linking U.S. strikes against Iran to Russia's war against Ukraine. Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov claimed that Washington and Israel are trying to draw Gulf states into conflict, just as the West allegedly drew Ukraine into war with Russia. Other Russian officials are pushing the same narrative. Dmitry Medvedev has criticized the United States for speaking about peace while carrying out military operations, while Russian lawmaker Alexei Chepa warned that Moscow could begin to question whether the United States can act as an impartial and honest mediator in negotiations over Ukraine. So, according to analysis, the Kremlin has long tried to delay negotiations on Ukraine, while also avoiding actions that could trigger stronger U.S. pressure or sanctions. At the same time, Moscow has been trying to maintain its ties with partners such as Iran. That balancing act may now be becoming harder.
The escalation in Kremlin rhetoric against the United States following the start of U.S.-Israeli operations against Iran on February 28 indicates that the Kremlin may be increasingly struggling to balance preserving relations with the United States and preserving relations with its partners as the operations against Iran continue. Russia may also use these direct criticisms of the United States as a negotiating partner to exculpate itself from the future failure of negotiations on the war in Ukraine.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov said that all countries allegedly suffering from U.S. and Israeli aggression are strategic partners of Russia. According to Lavrov, Moscow maintains dialogue with them and will work together with what he called the peace-loving majority of the international community, including within the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly, to make such military operations impossible.
All those suffering from U.S. and Israeli aggression are our strategic partners. We maintain dialogue with them and will do everything possible to work with other peace-loving members of the international community, including in the UN Security Council and the General Assembly, to foster an atmosphere that will make this operation completely impossible.
After these statements, Moscow once again appealed to the United Nations, calling for discussions about international security and condemning what it describes as Western military aggression. The rhetoric is striking, coming from a country that launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine and continues to carry out daily missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities. Despite that, the Kremlin is trying to position itself on the global stage as a defender of international law and stability. Europe is starting to prepare for worst-case scenarios. As the war continues in Ukraine and fighting spreads across the Middle East, countries in Northern Europe and the Baltic region have begun working on joint plans to evacuate civilians. Sweden, together with partners from the Nordic and Baltic region, as well as Germany and Poland, signed a memorandum on cooperation aimed at protecting civilian populations. The announcement was made by Sweden's Ministry of Defense. The idea is to prepare for situations where people might temporarily need to leave their homes and move to neighboring countries. Governments are now discussing how evacuation across land borders could work in practice. This includes transport planning, border procedures, evacuation corridors, and systems to receive and register people. Special attention will be given to protecting vulnerable groups. Officials say the experience of Russia's war against Ukraine has shown how important it is to have such plans ready. They allow countries to continue defending themselves while keeping civilians safe.
We are NATO members and neighbors who are mutually dependent on each other for our security. This MOU expresses our desire to further deepen cooperation in our region and to strengthen our joint preparedness.
Ukraine may help protect US bases in the Middle East from Shahed drones. The United States has asked Ukraine for assistance in countering Iranian Shahed attack drones in the Middle East. According to Reuters, citing sources familiar with the situation, Ukrainian personnel could join efforts to protect American bases in the region within the next few days. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that Kyiv had received the request from Washington.
We received a request from the United States for specific support in protecting against Shahed drones in the Middle East region. I instructed that the necessary capabilities and the presence of Ukrainian specialists be ensured.
Sources told Reuters that preparations for the mission are already underway, and Ukrainian specialists could help protect US military facilities and personnel in several countries in the region. During the full-scale war with Russia, Ukraine has gained important experience in countering Shahed drones, which Moscow frequently uses in attacks against Ukrainian cities. US President Donald Trump said that Washington is ready to accept assistance from partners in defending against Iranian drones. A serious political crisis is rapidly unfolding between Ukraine and Hungary. What began as a dispute over Russian oil has in just the past 24 hours turned into a much broader conflict involving the blocking of European funds for Ukraine, increasingly harsh public rhetoric, and now a scandal surrounding Ukrainian armored cash vehicles seized in Budapest. At the center of the dispute is the troubled Druzhba pipeline, which carries Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia. After Russian strikes damaged infrastructure, the supply stopped. Budapest and Bratislava began putting pressure on Kyiv, claiming that Ukraine was delaying the restoration of transit. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban openly stated that Hungary would force Ukraine to reopen the route using political and financial instruments. Budapest also linked this dispute to its decision to block a 90 billion euro EU financial package for Ukraine. In response, Ukrainian president said he personally would not want to restore the route because it carries Russian oil, and there are principles that have no price. He also linked Orban's stance to Hungary's domestic political situation ahead of the elections and noted that technically the pipeline could be restored in about a month and a half.
To be honest, I wouldn't restore it. This is my position. I expressed it to the European leaders, to those who called me and asked about it. I also expressed it to the leadership of the European Union, because this is Russian oil, and there are certain principles that have no price. They kill us, and we have to give oil to Orban because he cannot win elections without it?
After that, the conflict moved into an even sharper phase. Hungarian authorities seized even employees of the Ukrainian state-owned Bank. They were transporting valuables from Austria to Ukraine in 2 armored vehicles as part of a regular interbank operation between Raiffeisenbank and Bank. The vehicles were carrying $40 million and 35 million euros and 9 kilograms of gold. The location of the vehicles has been established. They are reputedly held at a restricted facility belonging to Hungarian security structures in Budapest. Meanwhile, the fate of the bank employers remained unknown at the time of the statement. Ukraine has sent Budapest an official note demanding the immediate release of its citizens and the return of the assets. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha described the incident as the effective taking of hostages and said it amounts to state terrorism. The situation gained additional political resonance because just before the escalation, Hungary's Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó was in Moscow meeting dictator Putin.
Hungary cannot be threatened. The Hungarian Prime Minister cannot be threatened. We Hungarians cannot be blackmailed. With whatever President Zelensky threatens us, we will not allow the money of the Hungarian people to be taken to Ukraine. No matter what President Zelensky says, We will not allow Hungary to be dragged into the war.
This story brings together many different threats: Russian oil, elections in Hungary, European money for Ukraine, Budapest's ties with Moscow, and the physical seizure of Ukrainian citizens and assets. If Kyiv will not restore the dialogue, even despite the emotions on both sides, this could turn into a long and deeply toxic crisis. However, after the elections in Hungary, scheduled for April, the rhetoric from our neighbors may change. For now, though, everything suggests that this escalation may benefit Orban in the upcoming parliamentary elections and Moscow more broadly. Fox News presented a Ukrainian drone as an American technology. The American TV network aired footage of a Ukrainian interceptor drone while discussing U.S. technological advantages against Iran, but presented the system as an American development. The segment showed a drone intercepting Russian Shahed drones, while the studio commentary described it as an example of U.S. technology. However, the footage clearly displayed the name of the developer, Wild Hornets. During the segment, Fox News drone expert spoke about the role of American artificial intelligence in modern warfare. He said U.S. technologies allow faster responses to threats and are already being used in combat drone systems. In reality, the footage showed the interceptor drone Sting, developed by engineers from Wild Hornets and used by Ukrainian air defense units to destroy Shahed drones. The company later responded to the broadcast.
The footage shown in this segment features Sting, a Ukrainian interceptor drone developed by engineers at Wild Hornets and used by Ukrainian air defense units to destroy Shahed-type drones. This result is the outcome of a long and difficult path taken by Wild Hornets engineers together with Ukrainian soldiers, and we would be grateful if these achievements remained properly credited.
Thank you for watching. For more content, please subscribe.